Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We're at the Reporters Roundtable tonight, taking a look at some of the top stories of the week. As always, we're in a fast-moving news cycle. On deck tonight, another person shot and more violence connected to ICE agent activity in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Questions unanswered so far after a D.C. council member asks for more information about how MPD is cooperating with ICE agents. Former D.C. Councilman Kenyon McDuffie announces his run for mayor. The FBI raids a Washington Post reporter's home. And Smithsonian Director Lonnie Bunch sends exhibits and information to the Trump administration in what may be a precursor to removal. And of course, a promising young Washington informer, freelance photographer, loses his life in a D.C. car accident. Talking about all of that tonight, my guests are Misha Green, managing editor of the Washington Informer, and Sam Ford, former Washington bureau chief for WJLA TV 7. I might add that we were going to have Keith Alexander with Bloomberg Law on, but the news calls first. Keith reached out to me earlier today and said he's hopping on a plane heading to Minneapolis, Minnesota to cover the ICE raids and issues there. Look, thank you both so much for joining this conversation. And I really want to start with the most recent information that's coming out. Last night there was more there were more protests. There was what the Homeland Security Department is saying was a targeted stop where someone from Venezuela was shot. Golly, Misha, there just seems to be so much going around. Even Kristi Noem saying today that people should start carrying their passports.
It's really terrifying to hear about such news happening. As you said, the news cycle has not slowed down. As social media has said, 2026 is not letting up. But if you all remember, folks were somewhat jokingly saying in 2025, you might need to start carrying your passports. You might need to start carrying your other forms of ID to prove that you are a citizen. And now you're having the Secretary of Homeland Security suggesting such. It is a world that, as we celebrate today, the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, it is really horrifying to think when there have been so many people pushing for justice for decades that we are here today. And this is, I just wrote a piece about King as reflecting on his final speech, I've Been to the Mountaintop. And he says, let us get the issues straight. I'm paraphrasing a bit. But the issue is injustice. And that's where, when you look at what's happening in Minnesota, people are angry because that's what's happening. You have Renee Nicole Good, who lost her life January 7th. This man who, thank goodness, who is being treated now for non-life-threatening injuries, but who was injured yesterday by a federal agent. People are taking to the streets because they're confused, they're angry, and the federal government is responding saying they want more ICE agents in Minnesota, that they're ramping up federal agents there. And of course, the District of Columbia knows all about that. We unfortunately experienced something very similar in August with the ramping up of federal agents in the officer surge that we saw for 30 days. But when you're losing lives, it is just tragic. And I think is offering the world yet another wake up call about where the United States is, and what activists have been fighting for the past year at least, which is and warning folks that things are going to continue escalating and heightening, and we see it.
Yeah, Sam, you've covered all kinds of protests and the like during the course of your career. But how would you characterize what we're seeing now?
Well, first, I want you to see my T-shirt. It says OCO, and that's hello in Cherokee, and it's OCO, Voices of the Cherokee People. And this is one of the, I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation, and this is one of the shows that they put on. As a fact, it's an award-winning show, and OCO means hello. And one of the things that we've seen up in Minnesota is they're grabbing American Indians, and in some cases holding them because they look Hispanic. Who knows? But the point is, they're grabbing people off the street, and it doesn't, seem to matter to them a whole lot who these people are, and so it is like a chaotic thing. And I guess that's why Keith is on his way up there. Trump today is talking about invoking the Insurrection Act. So you would have the U.S. Army, the military, not the National Guard, but on the streets of Minnesota. I guess he wants harassing people. I was out earlier today here in D.C., and I'm sitting there looking, and by me walked 3 members of the National Guard. Are they needed here? Of course not. There's nothing going on here that requires the National Guard. Everything involved is about one man's ego. That is something that I think is unprecedented in this country. And that's what we're seeing, whether it is in DC or Minnesota or Portland, Oregon, or wherever it is. It's amazing to sit there and watch something like this. One man's ego is allowed to do this stuff to the country. Now, for example, Obama deported way more people than Trump has deported, but it was wasn't with a whole bunch of rancor, and he could have done it in a quiet way as well, but he didn't want that. He wants something that's going to be showy and terrifying, and that is him. And hopefully we survive this era. We will look back on it, with an idea that we can never let something like this happen again.
Well, it's interesting, Sam, when you were talking about some Native Americans being snatched up by ICE agents. And just last week we had a conversation with Dr. Niambi Carter, who is a University of Maryland professor in the School of Public Policy. She's also the author of a book on it's titled American While Black. It's a book about immigration and race. And she said on this program, and I would dare say she was not joking when she says it looks like we're going to have to start carrying passports because I said to her joking, because she's a fairer skinned Black woman, I said, we don't know whether or not she was born in Glenarden in the Dominican Republic, whether she was born in Puerto Rico or Brazil. But here we are now, Kristi Noem, making the comment that people should have their passports, have their papers. And that to me,
papers.
Yeah, papers. Yes. Exactly. With a German accent. And I think that is one of the things that is really frightening. All of us, Misha, Sam, myself, I know we all have passports because all of us, we travel internationally. But Misha, I know you probably keep it in the drawer next to the bed or in your desk or somewhere. But now, are you going to start keeping it in your glove compartment?
No, I live in Washington, D.C., and people love, for some reason, my car is try to go through Misha's vehicle. It says that somewhere. I didn't write it, but there's a sign. Thank goodness it's never been stolen, but I've had several break-ins. And
Mm.
passports, I mean, even, when you travel abroad, they say, make sure your passport is locked away and in a safe place. And I have it in my home in a safe place for the same reason. And so I will potentially like keep it in my purse when going around. And certainly if I'm even traveling in other places in the United States, I will bring it with me. But I'm not keeping it in my car by any means, just because I think that,
Well, you shouldn't have to keep it anywhere.
And
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the point.
And you're right, Sam. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that I hate that we're at this point. But I'm seeing, as Harold used a perfect word, is that folks are being harassed, and in an indiscriminate way. I mean, both of my parents were born in the United States, Black folks. As I sometimes joke when people ask my ethnicity, I go JB, just Black. But I'm stopped quite regularly by our East African brothers and sisters, often Ethiopian and Eritreans. And I'm seeing in other places in the United States where they are being harassed by agents and saying, oh, it's because you have an accent. Show me your paperwork. And so, it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, as we see. They will stop you. They will harass you. Well, sorry, it does. If they assume you're a person of color, but they're not positive where you're from, you are subject, unfortunately, to harassment depending on where you are in this country. And so, no, I don't want to carry my passport anywhere. I shouldn't have to.
And I don't think most Americans have passports. I really don't.
And you're right, correct. I mean, I think that brings up another question, Sam, of access, of and
Identification.
and identification, but also disparities and things like that. I mean, if you can't afford a passport, how can you necessarily prove who you are? And I even think about the young people who are navigating the district. Sam saw 3 National Guardsmen today who might have to have some interaction with federal agents who look, you can't tell how old they are, but don't have official identification because they're not over 18. And so there are a lot of questions right now. Unfortunately, people are walking around in fear. Again, I hate to go back to August, but I think, we're dealing with a lot of local folks who remember the amount of heightened fear and folks feeling like they were walking on eggshells. And yet, though that surge has passed, there are still challenges, not only in Minnesota, Oregon, the district, but nationwide.
Well, let me ask Sam about this, Misha, because that you bring up another point. As you know, DC Council member Brooke Pinto back in December sent a letter to MPD requesting information about what level of participation there was between MPD and these immigration and custom enforcement agents. She got a response from Acting Chief Jeffrey Carroll over the weekend. She was not happy with it. She said it was inadequate. Now, Carroll says that he will attempt to do a better job in answering those questions, but he needs more time. There's a hearing coming up next month on this same thing, Sam. But gosh, there's so many issues. What does this portend for the relationship between Carroll and the council? What does it suggest that Pinto did not get the information that she was looking for?
Well, I think, don't you think you talked about eggshells? Don't you think that the district officials are walking on eggshells now because you've got the madman in the White House and you never know what's going to happen? What degree do they cooperate? I mean, DC has rules, about a lot of things. And are they forced then to enforce these rules that are contrary to city law? Or what do they do? Or do they just escort these federal cops around the city? So he's probably being vague intentionally. Because I mean, if he answers one way, it violates the city's policy. If he answers another way, it violates the federal government's policy. I think the man or anybody in that position is in a tough spot.
Yeah. And between that, there is what is the truth, or what are the facts?
Right.
And it's probably a combination of both. In some ways. But when you hear about, for example, if there is some crime here, a lot of folks respond. It's not just DC police that are responding to anything anymore. It's DC
Sam,
police.
I'm sorry. Hold on. Don't forget your point. I was just looking at the time. I got to take a break. So hold your fire, Sam Ford. We're going to pick up on the other side. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation at the Reporters Roundtable. My guests are Misha Green, managing editor of the Washington Informer, and Sam Ford, former Washington bureau chief for WJLA TV 7. Sam, as always, everything you say is so interesting. I was letting the time get away from me. Please finish your point.
No, the point you were asking, you were saying that Brooke Pinto, one of the council members, had sent the acting chief a letter basically asking to what degree is DC cooperating with the federal authorities here involving law enforcement, if you will, here in the city. And she said, according to you, I didn't really read it, but according to you, she said basically that it was vague. His response was not right. His response was vague. And then I said that I thought it was probably intentionally vague because he is walking a tightrope basically between the city's laws on one side, the federal policies on the other side. And I think he's just trying to get through the middle. I don't think anybody knows what's really supposed to happen here. I mean, supposedly you've got this federal authorities. Is Trump really running the city? People seem to be afraid of him and they don't want to cross him. But at the same time, the city has laws. You have some people, who have criticized the mayor and city officials, saying, why aren't you more assertive in dealing with the federal government? But then you've got this madman in the White House who might take home rule. Only takes a vote, right? That's all it takes is an affirmative vote by the House of Representatives, which currently, even though they only have a majority of 2 or 3, yeah. But that's all it takes. And so it's a tightrope walk. And in terms of the acting chief, he was just probably trying to get through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, Misha, here's the interesting thing to Sam's point. Let us say that Acting Chief Carroll is completely transparent and it is revealed that hypothetically that MPD is fully cooperating with ICE. What's the council going to do about that? I mean, it just seems to me that we are in a space right now, whether it's the Clintons not testifying on Capitol Hill or the president doing what he wants to do. We're in a who's going to check me boo kind of world.
I mean, I think we're in a who's going to check me boo kind of world because of who is occupying 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I contend because I think if folks felt comfortable per our word of eggshells today, if folks felt comfortable holding leaders accountable and being able to then take steps that would then not cause for federal intrusion in the district, because that's what would end up happening, is that there'd be some level of federal response in a way that would not be welcomed by Washingtonians, we'll say, and certainly by the DC Council. And so I understand that everybody's in a tight spot. But I think that transparency, for many reasons, would at least help the accountability conversation that everyone's talking about. I mean, also, interim chief Carroll is in an interesting spot because, one, he's not official chief yet, but there are a lot of people, particularly among the activism community, pushing back on him being confirmed, specifically due to interactions that happened during the Black Lives Matter protest of 2020. And so when you're considering somebody in a level of leadership at another heightened time for the district and for the nation, I mean, I think eggshells is correct, but I think that to make the council is begging for transparency. If there's an answer that they don't want to hear, I know that you're right, Harold. You goes back to the who gonna check them, but at least there's something there. And I mean, as a journalist, I'm always going to advocate on the side of transparency first. Of course, but you know, you're right. If nobody's going to check anybody, if folks can get away with the fact that, we know that that leaders are walking on eggshells in order to just protect the district's limited home rule, which I know is happening, then folks can't get very far.
Yeah, it could be a really long 3 years.
It could be a very long 3 years. And I know we're going to get to this, and you've teased this to your viewers, so it won't ruin anything. But I think that is why this mayoral season will be very interesting,
right?
And certainly with the council too. I mean, we won't talk much about that today, but it's going to be, at least leading up to June. Generally in the district, we know who, once the primary winners are decided, we know who's going to win in November. But I think let's
talk about that, because that was my next point. There are two higher profile candidates who have announced, the Ward 4 council member Janice Lewis George and Kenyon McDuffie just announcing yesterday. So, and certainly there are some lesser known candidates who have also thrown their hats in the ring. Just for the sake of argument, we may not know who will win the primary in June, but we know who it will not be. It will not be Muriel Bowser. And so, because she is not running. And so, and she has appointed Jeffrey Carroll as interim. We do not know what the relationship is, or whether or not any of the candidates, Lewis George or McDuffie, may have in mind should they win for MPD police chief. But Sam, I'd love to have you put your history hat on again. I would imagine that you've had a great deal of interaction, certainly with Kenyon McDuffie before you retired. He had been on the council for quite some time.
Well, yeah, Kenyon McDuffie was a council member, and of course, he then wanted to run for D.C. Attorney General. He was disqualified as D.C. Attorney General as a Democrat, and so he came back to run as an independent for the D.C. Council, and he had the obvious support of the mayor, and he challenged Alyssa Silverman, and kind of a scandal blew up in her campaign, and so he won. He was back on the council. He had left as the Ward 5 council member, and then he thrown his hat in as Attorney General, disqualified, came back as an independent with the mayor's help, and defeated the incumbent, who was Alyssa Silverman. So he has been around for a while. He's was the council member focused on the business community. He had been public safety, but then he was most recently focused on business. And so he's been on the council for a while, and so this is not just a terribly, let's say, unusual thing. He's been there for quite a while. He emphasizes the fact that he is a Washingtonian. He apparently was born and grew up everything in the same house there on North Capitol Street near Michigan Avenue. So that is what he is pushing. And then on the other hand, you have Janice Lewis George. She is kind of a maverick, if you will, on the DC Council. She does her own thing. She is an attorney who has represented causes for poor people, and sometimes unpopular causes. One interesting thing is I am a district resident, so I got this long phone call one day asking me all these questions about Janice Lewis George.
Was it a survey? We got a survey?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sitting there listening to this. So what do you think of Miss Lewis George, this and that? And I'm like, okay, so this, so I guess I was one of those they're using to test the water, So again, she represents the same district that Muriel Bowser represented when that's Ward 4, when she became the mayor of Washington. And it is, as I said, it'll be an interesting race. I don't know who's got the let's say the advantage at this point. You're absolutely right. Whoever wins in June will win in November. But it'll be interesting.
And I understand it's been reported that she kind of fancies herself kind of a Democratic socialist, similar to New York Mayor Zoran Mamdani. I'm going to get that right. Zoran Mamdani. Gosh, guess I'm glad not to be in New York. Trying to get that name pronounced correctly. But so notwithstanding, as Sam said, it's going to be an interesting, an interesting race, not only to watch, interesting to cover, and certainly whoever wins, it will definitely reflect a bit of a change as it relates to DC. I do want to. Oh my goodness! Forgive me, Misha. I didn't even ask your thoughts about that quickly. Anything you want to add about those two candidates or the upcoming race?
I do think it'll be very interesting. King and McDuffie's long tenure on the council, and particularly his relationship with the business community, I think makes him an interesting candidate. And I love what he's going with in terms of just language, as that he was a former mailman. I've interviewed King and McDuffie so many times that I had not realized that. And so this notion of delivering, just the journalist in me, I loved that language. And so I think that's interesting. But people are also very excited about Janice Lewis George, who, as Sam used, has been a maverick, very strong on the council, and made her voice heard in a way that I think has been incredibly impressive in her time representing the people of Ward 4 on the council. But also she has been very open as an advocate of the people, and I think because of that, she has a really interesting demographic supporting her. Yesterday, she just had her official launch event that even had a go-go band, I saw. And so it seems like, there are other candidates, as you said, but I would imagine it'll be a heated race between the two of them. And with this ranked choice voting and all of that in the mix, I just know that the Washington Informer will have a pulse on it, so stay tuned. And for our the other Sam, who I have to shout out, Sam Ploquia Collins Jr., who is our DC senior political reporter, who will keep a great pulse on that. So
yes, we need to get Sam back on this program as well. We will be calling him. I do want to move on to this next issue that I found really kind of disturbing, where the FBI raided the home of a Washington Post reporter. They claim that it's related to classified information. They seized a phone, laptop computers, a Garmin watch from the home of Hannah Nathanson. Now, the FBI says that she wasn't the focus of the probe. They were actually saying that they are investigating a government contractor. He was charged in federal court in Maryland last week. The thing that I'm really interested in hearing from you, Sam, is not so much about this particular case, but you know how we are about sources. We're very protective of our sources, and to have the federal government raid the home of a reporter, whether it's the Washington Informer or Washington Post or WHUR or anyone else, that to me is frightening.
That's true, and that is what we get with this administration. All what we thought were the norms basically go out the window. If they want you, they just grab you. If you're the president of Venezuela, they just go grab you and bring you here. And so, therefore, if you're a reporter, there's no respect for, in my opinion, the tradition, the Constitution, the freedom of the press. There's no respect for any of that. They do what they do, and if they're stopped, then they'll say, "Oh, okay." And the question is, who's stopping them? It doesn't seem like they're getting stopped very much. So in this case, it is very frightening when you think about this. And I was reading the Washington Post story about it, because it was a Washington Post reporter, and they were saying that reporters now are looking for ways to protect themselves. For example, a lot of reporters have face recognition. They said they're taking the face recognition off their computers and they're putting in a password because, they don't believe these people can make them give them the password. So, but if you got face recognition, they might even be able to take your picture and put it up there and be able to open a computer and spy on what you're working on. And so it is unprecedented, but again, you've got a bunch of people who don't respect anything. They don't respect anything. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're the president of Venezuela. Doesn't matter if you're Greenland, who's been part of Denmark forever. They just do what they want, and so of course they're not going to respect freedom of the press. So the press has got to take extraordinary steps to protect its sources. Otherwise, people are going to be obviously concerned about even talking to you, because they talk to you and then next, somebody's got them in court.
Yeah, I mean, Misha, can you, imagine, FBI knocking on your door and they say, well, no, we are not here to arrest or investigate you, but we still want to come in and take your stuff. That's crazy to me.
I can't imagine it. And, I mean, thank goodness that the FBI, I'm horrified, first of all, for Hannah, and that she had to experience that. And just as a fellow journalist, she was in her home, minding her business, doing her job when that happened. And I can't imagine it. But of course, when I hear about any law enforcement official interacting with someone at their home, I am still in mourning since 2020 with my sister, Breonna Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And the other sisters and brothers who we've lost when they were just minding their business in their homes. And so for multiple reasons, as a Black woman, it might have looked a little different. And for me, it would have been out of fear, and so I have no idea how that raid took place, but I know that Hannah had to be afraid, even as they said, well, we're not technically here for you, but give me all your things.
Yeah, that just doesn't make sense to me, because I would have asked, okay, well, if you're not here for me, of course, I'm sure she asked, do you have a warrant for? I mean, it's that doesn't make sense.
No,
to me at all, because if you're not here for me, but you want to investigate something, I'm just thinking, gosh, uh, Woodward and Bernstein during Watergate, if their homes had been, raided, and they wanted to know who Deep Throat was, and what means they would have gone through to get information about uh Deep Throat. I think fortunately, uh the Washington Post has the financial and legal chutzpah
Yeah.
to address this, but we'll have to wait and see how this certainly plays out. One of the other things that is happening, and this is again one of those stories that is particularly concerning to Black people, with the Smithsonian Institution Secretary Lonnie Bunch handing over documents, materials for exhibits having to do with the 250th anniversary of the United States. Um, Bunch has been, under pressure by the Trump administration to submit or to have exhibits reviewed, because the administration finds that some of the things that are in the Smithsonian exhibits do not align with the Trump administration's way of thinking, Sam. I mean, as you know, in the portrait gallery, information about impeachment, the two impeachments about President Trump have been removed, but the impeachment information about President Clinton, Richard Nixon, had not been removed, or the potential impeachment of Richard Nixon. Let me make sure I have my history straight. He was not impeached. He was getting close. That's why he resigned. But Sam, as it relates to Black people in history and the possible whitewashing, again, this seems to be a bit of a precursor to that.
Well, yeah, it's certainly. I was sort of surprised by that, and I thought I heard you say at the beginning that it may be the precursor to Bunch leaving. Did
No,
you
no,
say
not
that?
Bunch leaving. No, not Bunch leaving.
Oh,
No,
okay,
no,
that's
no.
what I thought you had said. Well,
No.
no, I mean, he's there, and given the situation, again, you're dealing with this person in the White House. I don't know that he had a whole lot of choice, you know.
Right. And
And
what I said was a precursor to removal. What I should have said was removal of the information, but no, not Bunch, not Bunch
Okay.
leaving. No,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I mean, he's doing, but a lot of this stuff is just absolutely stupid. I don't know. One of the places that I like to go is to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Harper's
Mm,
Ferry is where John Brown, the freedom fighter, was hanged for trying to break into the federal arsenal there to arm the slaves and other people. I mean, was it a good idea? I don't think so, right? It didn't seem very practical to me, but nevertheless, you go over there. I understand that they were told to remove references to slavery. How in the world do you go to an exhibit about John Brown, who died fighting slavery, and remove all references to slavery? I mean,
yeah,
it is, it's some guy who not very, he's first off, he's not very knowledgeable about history or anything else. And so I want to go over there, given I wonder, what am I going to see?
yeah.
You
How
know,
about that?
or if you're going to talk about is he going to say that the African American History Museum cannot talk about segregation or slavery? What that's a history. That is a big part of the history. But he has done this. You're right. I mean, he is trying to rewrite history, and he doesn't even understand history. But he just certain code words or things he just doesn't like. So get rid of that.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I
And
would even
go
say,
ahead, Misha.
because you say, is this a precursor, this oversight that now he's requiring of Bunch? But I think the precursor was his first day in office, where he eliminated diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think the precursor was when the U.S. Air Force temporarily removed information about the Tuskegee Airmen as a part of their courses. I think we just saw recently his move of MLK Day and Juneteenth no longer being free holidays for national parks. but now Flag Day is, which also happens to be his birthday. So I think the writing has been on the walls. Excuse me, a biggie to Sam's point. But when they threatened to take away federal funding when teaching what they called critical race theory in schools, I mean, there has been so much that has already been done and enforced by this administration, that I'm like, I am just waiting for the news on what the Trump administration says is inappropriate in several of the museums. I mean, I think, we're spoiled here in the nation's capital being able to visit all these museums for free. But what I love in getting to check all of them out is that they really don't shy away from the truth. And so it's not just the African American History Museum, but it's still the Portrait Gallery. It's the National Gallery of Art just had a beautiful exhibit that just went down about the Black power movement, in Black arts. And so we're talking things that could technically be threatening based on this president's rhetoric January 2025.
One thing that's
go ahead real quick, Sam, because I'm running out of time, and I want to.
Okay. Well, anyway, just one thing that I did. People talk about he's not a racist, so I just said, well, I asked Google, what do avowed racists think of Trump? People that admit they're racist. And I just want to read a little of this. This is
real quick.
While avowed racists and white supremacist groups have largely expressed support for Donald Trump's rhetoric and policies, viewing them as aligned with their goals, there's little public evidence of them having any significant complaints with him personally. So now, if the avowed racists like you, I think that's a good sign you're a racist.
I want to talk real quick about Markel Williams, a freelance reporter, freelance photographer with the Washington Informer, who lost his life a week or so ago. Real quick, Misha, and you've been interviewed before by us and others. Just your thoughts on his passing, and Sam, I want you to share your thoughts about the incident as well. I've got about 2 minutes. Go ahead, Misha.
I'm still heartbroken by Markel's passing, but what has brought me comfort is how many people have poured out their love and ensured that Markel's name remains alive, his legacy continues. And we've even heard from businesses near unfortunately, where Markel lost his life to senseless and driving, really. And so, and they want to remember Markel's life with some of his photography. And so I am just comforted in that. His funeral will be this Tuesday at Greater Mount Calvary Baptist Church on Rhode Island Avenue. And so please, if you'd like to remember Markel Williams, come out on Tuesday and remember his life.
Sam, you and I were talking prior to the broadcast. You were concerned about how this happened. You got a minute to share your thoughts about that.
Well, the way it happened, apparently it was around 4:00 in the afternoon. I understand. I did text the DC police trying to get a little more information on this thing. And he had been stopped by police. The driver of the car had been stopped by police and took off at that point. And the DC police apparently followed him. Now, I'm not going to say chase because there's some issues here as to whether it's a chase or being followed. But the point is, this kid, this 20-year-old who was driving like crazy at 4:00 in the afternoon, hits another car. There's all kind of pandemonium. And this young man who's walking on the street is killed. Okay. And it concerns me about chases. Now, both of the police officers involved in this are on administrative leave because of the chase. But innocent people are being killed in this country because of chases. And you have the House of Representatives now want to make it easier or maybe even force DC police to chase more. One article that the Washington Post did back in August, when they started telling the park police to chase people, they chased people in 22 instances, and in 18 of those instances, they had accidents. That's something that should tell us, be careful with this.
Yep.
Sam Ford, Misha Green, thank you both so much. I appreciate your time. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, January 15th, 2026. I'm Harold Fisher.